Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Profluence Sports. Got an exciting one today with Brian Hoyer and Leo Rifkind. So, gentlemen, appreciate you coming on and excited to roll into this one.
Thanks, Andrew.
Leo, I guess kick us off. Tell us a little bit about you, what you guys are doing, and then Brian can obviously familiar name for some of the fans of NFL football here, but you guys can lead us off, and then we'll get into the juice and meat and the fun stuff here.
Yeah, sure. I'll kick us off. So I'm the founder and partner of a European growth equity investor called Chiron Sports Group. We're focused exclusively on sports and entertainment. I've been doing this for almost 3 years, done a bunch of deals in different spaces. And this project really came together mid last year. I remember reading an article between Florida State University and 6th Street trying to come to a deal and thinking, well, that's phenomenal. If that could be done, the scalability of that project is huge. Is it possible? So I sat down with one of the MDs at 6th Street and I said, what's this all about? And we sort of broke it apart. And he said, look, it's really, really hard because of reasons ABC. And Andrew, I'm sure you're familiar with that situation. I think most people know what happened there. But what I realized was actually some of these things are solvable. You're just going to have to take a really flexible and long-term approach to solving the issues. We have a partnership with London Business School. So as Chiron and London Business School, we came together to start outlining some data analysis of where monetization and value creation was possible within the college ecosystem. That is kind of the first issue. How are colleges going to make enough money to pay the athletes if that's going to be where the decisions are going to go? And I think when I looked down at the top-down analysis we created, I thought, this is great for a bunch of consultants at BCG and Bain and McKinsey, but it doesn't really answer the question. We need to talk to some people. And so we used our athlete network. We invest in lots of sports deals and through that know lots of athletes and said, hey, let's speak to some athletic directors, let's speak to some athletes, let's speak to some finance directors and really figure this out. And so by January, February, March, we were flying across the US, doing Zoom calls at all hours of the day, trying to figure that problem set.
And one of the great things the NFL and the NFLPA offers are these programs while we're active players. And I did a program at Harvard Business School. And I met a guy there who I had been in some calls with, and Leo was on one of the calls. And afterwards, he reached out to me and said, I'm thinking about going in and establishing this fund that's going to invest in and around collegiate sports. And I thought, wow, what a great idea. And it perfectly paired up with me retiring in the NFL. I had a lot of free time and I was jumping on these calls with Leo. And as you know, and we've all seen here in the United States, college sports is no longer amateur athletics, right? People are getting paid left and right. Obviously, they're negotiating now about revenue share and all those things. And I thought, this is a great opportunity to get involved in something that I'm familiar with, the sports realm. Obviously, college football is one of the biggest revenue drivers in our country. And it was something I knew a lot about. And so Leo and I went back and forth, bounced ideas. And look, I'm not of the business world whatsoever, but I've been in the business of sports. So I figured I could kind of give the perspective of an athlete and having played for 9 different organizations, how things like that work, how obviously having played collegiate sports. And so we kind of talked back and forth and he was like, we're going to go ahead and do this. And he had the foresight, which I think was very amazing of him to say, what about you putting together a team of athletes that we can kind of pair up with and not just be the typical private equity fund. And so through that, I reached out to a lot of guys that I've played with and familiar with. And so we have a team now of myself, the McCourty twins, Devin and Jason, Rob Gronkowski, who I played with, obviously New England. You're going to notice a pattern here, very New England heavy, but guys that I have come to love and respect and knew would be able to put time and commitment into this. Matthew Slater, who's one of the greatest special teams players that ever play the game. And then we have Kevin Youkilis, who played for the Red Sox, and also his niece and Tom Brady's niece, Maya Brady, because we've realized we're trying to not just be football or male sport heavy, but try to include female sports. And she was the one athlete of this group that's lived through this NIL era, right? So we've put together a group of athletes, and I think the goal for us is to use our connections, the places we've been, the people we've met, use our, for lack of a better term, NIL, help promote this fund. And it's been awesome to get on some of these team calls with Leo and his team over at Chiron and learn about what they're pursuing, deals with schools, conferences, picks and shovels deals with companies that would be able to help collegiate athletes, a lot of different tech deals that I've seen. And look, before I met with Leo, I didn't know what a family office was. I have a friend who he's like, yeah, I run my family office. I'm like, oh, that's nice. He runs a family office. Mm-hmm. Then I get on these calls with Leo and we're talking to family offices looking to invest. And I've learned a lot in a matter of a year about all of this and to be able to put a team together with some real star power to put behind this fund, and we've opened a lot of doors for Leo to get in and kind of pitch his ideas. And so it's been a great opportunity for me, for those guys, and learn a lot from Leo, learn about the space. The reason we call it Legacy25, this is the ecosystem that helped basically raise us into professional athletes. Well, now you have these, quote unquote amateur athletes. They're basically professional athletes too. And I think we take a different perspective. We're not just trying to, obviously you want to create the returns and the revenue, but also we understand what it's like to be a college athlete. We understand what it's like to be a professional athlete, and also what makes programs work. I mean, between the group of our athletes, we have multiple Super Bowl championships, World Series champions. So we know what it's like to be a part of a winning team. And I think that's what will set us apart is that team atmosphere, us pairing with Leo and his team. And it's been a hell of a ride. And I think the biggest thing that we're looking at is you see conversations like this happening all over. I'm sure you've recently seen the Big Ten, the conference that I played in, looking to inject revenue, whether that's through private equity or starting a new vehicle to generate, whether it's media revenue, all of that stuff. And so we can see the trend that it's going. And as Leo said earlier, we're lucky to be in early, and that's helped with a lot of these conversations.
Love it. And then I'm going to come to you again here, Brian, real quick. And then Leo, back to you. Good to have you back here with us. So Brian, playing at in the Big Ten, obviously NIL, I mean, it's always existed to some degree. And we're talking more about the pay-to-play version,
Sure,
not the endorsement side. But like, it's always existed to some level. I mean, I played at a mid-major Division I basketball school. And, I knew of guys that came in or left that were taking, some money under the table even before NIL, right? So it's always existed. I don't know why it's like people try to act like it doesn't now.
Sure.
Right. But
I mean, the best NIL deal I got at Michigan State was hoping I could get a free burrito at Chipotle, and still worrying that I was going to get in trouble. So
it's crazy. It's crazy, right?
I know.
But just curious your perspective on it now, where you see these guys making, even backups making crazy money. I'm just more from an athlete perspective. I think always people appreciate hearing someone that's been in it for a while at a high level, how you think about it, how you see it, how it would have impacted or changed if you were going through it. And then Leo, I'll come back to you more on like what you guys are doing structure wise and whatever.
Yeah, it's wild, Andrew. I think it's crazy. I mean, the toothpaste is out of the tube, right? You can't put it back in. And as an athlete, I look at it as you do deserve to get paid in a certain sense. I mean, you look at, let's just talk about college football, generating billions of dollars in revenue. And yeah, it's great. I got my free education to Michigan State and all of those athletes that before the NIL era, that gives you a leg up, right? You don't have to pay. There's no student loans, all of that stuff. But the reality is it was pennies based on what we were helping generate at those schools. So I think it was a great idea. Obviously, NIL was for, in my opinion, when I first heard about it, it was like, okay, you go down to the local mall, you do an autograph signing, here's $50K, or the local car dealership is going to have you run an ad and you're going to get a free car. And obviously there's always loopholes, right? And so they've exposed those loopholes. You create the funds, and now all of a sudden, I mean, I look at quarterback, I would have been making millions of dollars to be the quarterback at a Big Ten school, which is wild to me. And I'm not going to be one of the old heads who's like, they don't deserve it. No, they do. And I think there's got to be a way to figure out, I mean, there's no salary cap. Then you go to the transfer portal. It's like the NFL having free agency all year round, no contract limits, all of that. And so I think there's got to be a way to rein it in. I think they're trying to do that. Obviously, the case when they're talking about revenue sharing, I think having that will help rein it in, but you're still not going to be able to monitor, if you're the University of Texas and one of your biggest donors has a big company, he's like, I'll still give the quarterback a deal on the side. How are you going to be able to, that's true NIL. So how do you really monitor that? And I think learning through all of this and with Leo and this process, you realize like chaos provides opportunity. And I think that's the biggest thing we're looking at here. And the one thing that I would say sets us apart is we have a group of athletes that have gone through it, who've lived through it. And I think, like I mentioned, Matthew Slater, he's honestly probably one of the greatest people I've ever met. And so when we brought him into this, one of the first things he said is like, how can we use this fund to help the athletes? Let's say we get a deal with a university. Can we help these guys with financial literacy? Can we, there's another tech company that me and a few of these guys have invested in. It's called Optimized Mind Performance. And it's really about the mental health skills and training. Can we pair that somehow with our fund to help these athletes deal with the pressure? I mean, look, it's a pressure cooked environment before you're getting paid to play. let alone now, everybody knows how much you're making in NIL money. You're the starting quarterback of whatever university. There's social media. I mean, it's a whole different world. And I think there's a lot of aspects of how our fund can help not only generate revenue, but also help these kids that are going through.
Yeah, and you said a few key things there. Michael Saylor, our friend at Strategy, always says like volatility is your friend, right? And now obviously in the
Right.
private markets, you don't see it as much, but that's what a lot of this is. And we saw what happened even with Kawhi Leonard in the NBA, right?
Right.
Like he was cutting a side deal. So you'll never fully probably remove it all, but yeah, there should be some guide rails. And I think you mentioned this earlier, Brian, or maybe it was Leo, but one of the biggest beneficiaries that no one talks about right now is Deloitte is the main winner in all of college sports right now. Like they are the main winner. It's nuts. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. Leo, give us the sort of the structure, the rundown, what you guys are really trying to do at Legacy25 from the investment perspective, and whatever you can share as you guys have progressed.
Yeah, sure. It came about really through understanding the conversation that goes from the athletic director to the finance director to the president. What are all these guys trying to achieve in their buckets? And fundamentally, they need to pay the players, but they need to do it in a sustainable way. So there are lots of solutions out there providing credit, different forms of that, to conferences, to schools, you name it. But on the whole, it's a short-term fix unless you're building the infrastructure and facilities and support to continue doing that over the time. So our main strategy is really to provide these guys with capital to invest in things that create revenue. Now, a part of that is roster, obviously. Winning is marketing. Marketing sells stuff. If you have stuff to sell, you make revenue, for sure. But coupled with that is also you need a commercial unit. You need a proper sales team. You need data analytics. You need a social media manager. You need all these roles. And you need a proper infrastructure to be able to sell the stuff. And so the packages that we're providing, on the one hand, and this applies to both conferences and the institutions themselves, is enough money to fill the roster to be at a competitive level that you want to be in your conference. But at the same time, you're also required to take this funding to build infrastructure or commercial capabilities to monetize that in future for you. And what's in it for us? We're sharing in the revenue. That's what this is about. So we're about revenue growth. And that's where we're trying to align incentives. From a conference perspective, it's pretty similar, but only slightly different in that we're thinking about all the schools. So it's really about what are the combined services that a conference can invest in, obviously as an upfront cost, but it creates revenue for all the schools. And then on the back end, we're not naive to the fact if we're going to be a division of the revenue, a piece of the pie as an N+1 school, effectively, it's important that the additional revenue created is greater than the slice that we end up taking. And those are the two deal structures that appear to be advancing the best for us. Now, we're playing in a bit of a different game than most people in that we're looking at schools and conferences with budgets between $10 and $100 million. So we're sort of competitive D1 schools, but we're not the big guys. And part of that goes to our thesis as Chiron, which is we're about growth, revenue, professionalization. And that leans on our own experience in European soccer and other sports which have gone through this journey in the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I'm curious like how you both think of, and either of you can take this first. I'm sure Leo would tackle it more from a structure, Brian more just from an experience. But I'm a basketball guy, Brian's a football guy. Like we believe, like I always had a hard time in college of like women's field hockey was on our budget. So there was every year, I think it was like 600 or 700 grand out the window where it's like, I'm not saying I should have got paid that but it's like a lot of these sports are subsidized by men's football and men's basketball and, women's volleyball a little bit, baseball a little bit. There's a few ones that do all right at some schools. How do you think about everything else? I mean, obviously you have the Score Act going on. How do you think about, and I hate to say like the women's sports or the Olympic sports, but that's really what it is.
Sure.
How do you think about that side of the coin as you build this out?
Leo, do you want me to, at least from an athlete's perspective, similar to you, Andrew, it's that's the reality, right? Like men's football, men's basketball, women's basketball. And I think even for me, I don't know if you felt this, but I felt that there's been more media-driven relativity around, especially with Caitlin Clark and what she was able to do at Iowa. And so you see that. And I think the one thing Leo, and I forget what, we were on a call with Leo's team, but they had actually found like some schools where like women's volleyball is actually can generate revenue. And so I think the one thing that we've seen is like, it's a case-by-case basis. There are certain schools where their men's basketball team far outweighs their football team, right? And so it really is a case-by-case scenario. And to your point, I think this is where we're going to get to when you get these rulings on revenue share. Well, how does that affect Title IX? And from the people that I've talked to, they're like, well, we'll just cut men's Olympic sports so we don't have to then fund a women's team. Well, I mean, that's where you're going to really, I think this is like the chaos and what you're talking about. Like, that's not what collegiate sports is about, right? It's about giving those people the opportunity. But ultimately, when you get to the real world, it's like, who's bringing in the money? How do you divvy that up? So it is one of those things that I think Leo can really hit on is there are certain women's sports or even maybe some sports like men's baseball with certain schools that can provide that revenue. So you really, I think the best thing that we're doing is looking at it a case by case basis. Like some of the deals that I've seen that we've been talking about are very different from one school to the next. What do you need? Is it, financial backing for your football program? Is it for a digital studio to create media? We've had some discussions, even like you talk about European soccer, like welcome to Wrexham. Like, how could you do that with a small football program and get people behind it and have, a docuseries on their training camp, like a Hard Knocks, so to speak. And I think the one thing, and I don't know about you, Andrew, but like the stuff that you see on Netflix, like Full Swing or Quarterback, like I love that stuff because being a former athlete, I want to see what's going on behind the scenes. I can watch the game and tell you exactly what's going on. And I think people love that too, because it takes you behind the curtain. And now that I'm in the media myself, I realize people love that stuff. They want to hear the stories from the locker room. They want to see those things. And I think you can do that with maybe some smaller D1 schools when it comes to their football program or basketball program, or even maybe like a baseball program that's going to the College World Series. And so I think us figuring out a way to help those programs generate more revenue.
Yeah. And I want to bring up one point before you go, Leo, but this, I think you both, and you might have heard this, but I was talking to an NIL agent, which, by the way, some of them are the basketball guys are crushing it just because even, there's no caps on their side. So they're taking, and a lot of them do the right things. And a lot of the ones I know do, business in a I think the right way. But, on a collective contract, they're still, they're taking more than, there's limits in the NFL and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but there's a school, it's a mid-major basketball school and no football. And what they're trying to do is if you have the 20.5 million allocation, they're trying to get 2 donors to put up all the money it would take to support all the other sports and use that entire 20.5 million on their basketball team. And I'm like, this is a school that they've made the tournament here and there. They're usually like a 13, 14 seed. They had an upset. They're solid, but it's like in 5 years, you could be like, this is the next Duke or UNC, because if they legit, right now, the highest that I know, at least talking to these guys behind the scenes, like the most a school's paying for basketball is like 6 to 7 million for their roster per year, which is still crazy, right? But it's, 20.5, that's triple that. So
your point,
I'm gonna throw that out there. Yeah.
To your point, like, okay, if you're a school like this, you don't have a football program, but you can take it and then you can have someone else pay for the other sports because you're going to generate so much revenue because now you're pumping into your basketball. There's so many ways to go about this. And I think what's hard is like, you mentioned like the agents fees, right? And like the NFL, because we have the NFLPA, like it's limited, it's capped at 3%. I'm hearing of agents now who are like, screw the NFL. Let me go get 10 or 5 big time NIL college football players at 10 to 15%. Like, I don't even have to work like NFL guys. That's too hard. And so, there's got to be some regulation around all of this stuff. But I think what you're seeing, and to your point, schools are trying to think creatively. How do we work around this? Can we have someone supplement these other sports so we can go all in basketball, for instance? So it is such a unique way to think of all those things. And I think that's the one thing I've learned is every deal that we're talking about is so different from the other deal that I think we allow the flexibility. And Leo, I'll let you hit on that. To be able to say, what do you need? What are your needs and how can we fit them?
Yeah.
I think this goes on a point that Andrew said initially, well, actually both of you said about volatility. The other thing with volatility is it's usually temporary. So although these NIL agents are making serious money, one of the expectations of private investment and I guess professionalization at large is proper governance. And that will cover all of these areas, or we hope. If it doesn't, then there's another question there. When I think about sort of the revenue versus the non-revenue sports, as Brian said, we think about it case by case. But more than that is, what's the sport there for? Is it there for student is it there for student benefit? Is it about participation? Is it about enrollment? Is it about marketing the school? Or is it a commercial entity? And only for some of them will they be commercial entities. And if I ask, like you said with your basketball team, Andrew, why should they subsidize another sport? They shouldn't. But the school should, because it's in the school's interest to have their athletes participating in great sports and improving their health and socializing and so on. So I think when we speak with athletic directors, we basically sit down with them and say, where do you see the value? And then we try and understand, okay, of these 1, 2, 3, 4 buckets, what does that look like independent from the whole bucket? And are they okay with that? What does that relationship look like?
Yeah, and also when you look at some of the endowment funds, I think there's going to be a lot of change. Like I think what's interesting about this whole space, like you said, it's the opportunity is yes, sports is changing, but also education is changing.
Yeah.
And so there's just all these factors happening at once that are colliding, and it's like it's hard to know what's going to come out on the other side. But the people that can position, they have insider information, they can make moves before that are, I don't. This again for another conversation, but like risk and luck, I have, I think, somewhat unique views on, and like I don't fully believe. Like I think a lot of people view risk wrong. Like I don't always look at things as like a risk, and then luck, I don't really, I sort of don't believe it exists in a lot of fashions. But anyway, there's all these things going in, and we're gonna come out in 10 years. And it's not just gonna be like, yo, college sports is different. It's gonna be like college is different.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you're seeing like it going downstream, even with the IMG academies, and then you have all these emerging leagues that are popping up. And Leo, obviously, you guys have done some stuff here. So what, Brian, what's it to say and for football, basketball, yeah, you're going to want to go to college. It's where the money's going to be. But if you're a women's volleyball player and what's to say, well, I can just skip college, get this sort of baked education and go play in one of the emerging pro leagues. Anyway, there's a lot rolling on in there as well. So it's quite fascinating. But yeah, I mean, I guess Leo sort of, or Brian, as we get closer to the end of this, what are some of the ones? Is there like anything you can talk about of some cool stuff you got cooking, or even at least like tease a little bit of it?
Yeah,
that would be awesome, and then we can kind of rock from there and close this out.
Yeah, Leo, go ahead.
I really wanted to speak about a specific school deal that we're on, and we have a bunch of term sheets with schools that are going back and forward with presidents and trustees and so on. But obviously there's some sensitivity there. We can talk about a conference deal though. It's a small one, but I think it's still illustrative to give a bit of a view on how these things cook. So it's not just theoretical really. Quite an interesting thing has happened over the last couple of years involving a very forward-thinking commissioner. So this is the merger of the ASUN and the WAC. You might know a bit about this. And the United Athletic Conference, UAC. These guys are super forward thinking and are trying to say, well, what can we do for our schools to provide the best outcome for them in this environment? And they have a bit of a clean slate here. And one of the things we've been helping them think through in partnership with a commercial strategy group called CSMG is actually, what does that commercial unit look like? How many people do they need? What's it going to cost? What's the revenue produced? And so on. And quite amazingly, if we take the N+1 structure, so maybe, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but the concept is Legacy25 would be one extra school in the list in favor of distributions, but not all distributions. Some distributions like pass-through are just for the schools. Others would fall in this camp. Things that would fall in this camp would be more like commercial sponsorship media, as opposed to grants or other things that come direct from NCAA. And the idea for us is we provide enough capital to become an N+1 school, and that amount of capital will be over a period of time such that we can justify our investment return. But more importantly for them, the revenue growth that they see is greater than the cost of capital that we charge. And as a final outcome, just to give you a bit of a feel for that, of the revenue bucket that they currently get, if we were to carve this out by school, they'd be looking at $470,000 per school. Sorry, that's post-deal. Before the deal, they'd be looking at $400,000 per school. Post-deal, $470,000 per school. And so this is a really nice outcome of what we're trying to do with Legacy25, which is to say, if you do the deal with us, we actually increase all of your revenues by X%, in this case 20. So that for me is quite a nice lay of the land of what these kind of things could look like and hopefully do look like, that win-win that everyone's seeking.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Now, how do you guys look at, obviously you're saying you're going after, it's probably not the right concept, but like, let's just call it mid-market conferences across college. How much do you pay attention to I know, Brian, you brought up the Big Ten earlier. Like, how much do you pay attention to that? How much do you think that impacts any of what you do? Do you think you guys actually potentially impact some of what happens there? What's sort of the lay of how you guys are viewing it all?
Yeah, Leo and I were kind of joking on the phone before this that like the Big Ten, reading into that, it's almost like someone saw what we've been presenting, because a lot of it was very similar to, I would say, the outlook of what we've presented to some of the schools and conferences. And I think the biggest thing, and like I said, I'm new to this, but I see trends, whether it's in sports or business, someone's always, the first domino's got to fall, right? And to your point, like volatility and no one knows what's going to happen. And I think some of these schools, conferences are like, okay, do we want to be the first? But to me, it's inevitable that there's got to be some way that this is going to go. And the fact that the Big Ten is discussing this tells me we're on the right track. I think that's the biggest thing. Leo and I were just joking, like literally I saw the story in ESPN and I sent it to him and I said, this sounds exactly like what we've been proposing. And the fact that the Big Ten is considering it only gratifies me even more that this is what I'm involved in. Because I think, and Andrew, you would know this and having been a collegiate athlete, a lot of times colleges, it's keeping up with the Joneses, right? Whether it's facilities, whether it's whatever, like the NFL, they don't care. Like the Cincinnati Bengals may have the worst facility, but guess what? You only have so many you can go to. And if they give you the contract, you're going to go there. Whereas college, they're having to recruit these kids. So kid goes to the University of Oregon and sees their facility. And then, USC is like, man, we got to get a better facility. And so is Ohio State. And so I think that's the biggest thing is that domino falls, whether it's us or whether it's the big dogs. I think it just proves that this is the way that it's going. I don't know, Leo, if you wanted to touch on that too.
Yeah, and there's the magic of what's not said, right? So this Big Ten deal gets a lot of publicity and it looks a lot like our structures. And we've been talking with everyone, so this isn't especially new. But only 2 schools opposed it. And obviously that means the deal might not go through, but that means a lot didn't. And so if they're very clear that they're not going to take the deal, a lot of those Big Ten schools, I would imagine, will then be opening the door and say, actually, we are looking for capital. And the right investors out there will be looking for partnerships with those guys. I'd like to believe we'll be one of them in that space, but we'll start lower down the chain and prove that it's possible.
Yeah, no, it's super fascinating, and I appreciate you guys both of you giving insight to everyone on the space. As these play out, as things hopefully get announced and put into motion, we'd love to have you guys back on, sort of, walk through how things really played out as it goes. But I guess as we close out, where can people learn more? What's sort of the website? Where's, general information for people just to stay up to date, track what you guys are doing, and, if they're in the college space also, just, keep an eye on everything.
Yeah, so we have a website, w.l-25.com, Legacy. And other than that, our LinkedIn on Chiron Sports Group is pretty active. So always happy to have new people engaging.
Cool.
Thanks, Andrew.
Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate you fellas both coming on, and man, it's gonna be fun to see how college plays out here over the next couple of years, and hope you guys are at the forefront of it.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew.
Appreciate that. Thanks for the time.